In a dusty archive room of the Melford County Records Office, there exists a file concerning the boy of 1111, a case that has baffled historians and paranormal researchers for over a century. The photograph shows an 8-year-old boy, Oliver Shaw, sitting at his father's workbench in the family clockmaking shop, holding a pocket watch in his hands. His pale face stares directly at the camera with an expression that would later earn him the name, the boy of 1111. The snapshot was taken on October 12, 1891, in the parlor of the Shaw family home in the village of Oak Haven, Melford County. It would be the last photograph ever taken of him. Exactly 27 nights after this image was captured, Oliver Shaw vanished from his bedroom, locked from the inside, at 11:11 p.m. and was never seen again. But what makes this case truly disturbing is not merely the disappearance of a child, but what happened during the 27 nights that preceded his final vanishing. A pattern of impossible events, meticulously documented by his father, witnessed by multiple credible observers, and investigated by local authorities, who could find no rational explanation. This is the story of a boy who began to disappear every night at the same precise instant, returning each time from a place he could not describe, until the night he vanished for good. To understand the horror of what occurred, we must first understand the world Oliver lived in and the family that desperately tried to save him. Victorian England in 1891 was a society built on order, precision, and rationality. The Industrial Revolution had transformed the nation into the world's most advanced country. Science was explaining mysteries that had puzzled humanity for centuries. Many believed the age of superstition was finally coming to an end. Oak Haven was a typical market town in Melford, with a population of around 3,000 souls. Nestled in a region of green hills, it was a prosperous community of merchants, artisans, and farmers. The town was proud of its medieval church, its bustling marketplace, and its growing reputation as a center of quality craftsmanship. The Shaw family lived on Willow Lane in a well-maintained Georgian townhouse that had been in the family for 2 generations. The 3-story house contained the workshop on the ground floor, the living quarters on the first floor, and the bedrooms on the second floor. Arthur Shaw, Oliver's father, was a respected watchmaker. His workshop on Willow Lane was known throughout Melford for the quality and precision of his work. Arthur had learned the trade from his own father and had spent 20 years perfecting his craft. He repaired everything from pocket watches to the great mechanisms in local church towers. His wife, Eleanor Shaw, came from a family of teachers and was known in the community for her education and refinement. She managed the household accounts, volunteered at the parish church, and had taught her young Oliver to read and write at a level far beyond his years. Oliver was their only child. Eleanor had suffered 2 miscarriages before Oliver was born in 1883, and doctors had warned her she would likely bear no more children. This made Oliver priceless to his parents. By all accounts, Oliver was a normal, healthy, intelligent boy. His village schoolteacher, Mr. Albert Wickham, would later testify that Oliver was bright, curious, and well-behaved, a model student with a particular aptitude for mathematics and reading. Oliver loved spending time in his father's workshop, watching Arthur repair the intricate mechanisms of clocks. The boy had developed a fascination with timepieces and their precise movements. Arthur had even begun teaching him the fundamentals of the trade, hoping that one day Oliver would take over the family business. The house itself would become crucial to understanding what happened. Arthur Shaw, fitting his profession, had filled the home with clocks. There were 24 pieces in total distributed across the 3 floors: grandfather clocks, mantel clocks, wall clocks, and displayed pocket watches. All were kept in perfect working order, synchronized to the exact time. The house resonated with the constant ticking and periodic chiming of precise timekeeping. It was this obsession with temporal precision that would make the events of October 1891 so impossible to dismiss or explain away. The first incident occurred on the night of October 13, 1891, exactly 1 day after the photograph was taken. Eleanor Shaw recorded the event in her personal diary, which was later submitted as evidence to the local magistrate. Her entry for October 14th read, Something very strange happened last night that I cannot explain. Sometime after we had all retired, I believe past 11, I was awakened by a sound. It was footsteps in the hallway, light and quick. Thinking Oliver had gotten up to use the chamber pot, I waited a moment, but the footsteps continued, pacing back and forth. Eleanor continued. I got up to investigate. When I opened our bedroom door, the hallway was empty. Puzzled, I went to Oliver's room and opened the door. His bed was empty. My heart froze with worry. I called for Arthur, and together we searched the house. We found Oliver in the parlor, standing in front of the grandfather clock, staring at it. He was in his nightshirt, barefoot, and seemed to be in some kind of trance. When Arthur touched his shoulder, Oliver started violently, as if waking from a deep sleep. He seemed confused and disoriented. When we asked him what he was doing downstairs, he said he didn't remember leaving his room. He said the last thing he remembered was lying in his bed trying to fall asleep. They assumed he had been sleepwalking, though he had never done so before. Arthur and Eleanor put him back to bed and thought little more of it. Sleepwalking, while concerning, was not uncommon in children. They decided to keep his bedroom door locked at night to prevent accidents. But the next night, October 14th, it happened again. This time, Arthur was the one who discovered Oliver missing. He had been working late in his workshop and was heading upstairs to bed when he noticed light under the study door, a room they rarely used at night. Opening the door, he found Oliver by the window, again in a trance-like state. Arthur noticed something that disturbed him. The study door had been closed when he came upstairs, and Oliver would have had to open it to enter. This suggested purposeful movement inconsistent with typical sleepwalking. When Arthur woke Oliver, the boy again had no memory of leaving his bed, but this time Oliver said something Arthur recorded in his own journal. "Papa, I was somewhere else, a cold place." The third night, October 15th, they locked Oliver's bedroom door from the outside, keeping the key with them. Both Arthur and Eleanor were determined to prevent another episode. At breakfast on October 16th, Eleanor asked Oliver if he had slept well. Oliver nodded, but then said something that chilled her. "I didn't leave my room, Mama, but I still went somewhere." When pressed to explain, Oliver became confused and couldn't articulate what he meant. But Eleanor noted in her diary that he seemed frightened by something he couldn't quite remember or understand. That night, October 16th, they again locked Oliver's door. Eleanor checked on him at 9 and found him sleeping peacefully. Arthur checked again at 10:30. The door was still locked, and through the keyhole, he could see Oliver in his bed. But sometime after 11, Eleanor was awakened by a sound she would describe as a clock chiming, but wrong somehow, discordant and jarring. She woke Arthur, and together they got up to investigate. As they stepped into the hallway, they heard it. Footsteps coming from the ground floor. Light, quick footsteps, a child's footsteps. Arthur rushed to Oliver's door. It was still locked. He fumbled with the key, his hands shaking, and threw the door open. The bed was empty. They found Oliver in the kitchen, standing in complete darkness, staring at the wall. When they lit a lamp, they saw he was shivering violently, though the night wasn't particularly cold. His feet were dirty, as if he had been walking outside, yet all the doors and windows were locked from the inside. This time, when they woke him, Oliver began to cry. "I don't want to go back there," he sobbed. "I don't want to go back." "Back where?" Eleanor asked, holding him close. "The cold place," Oliver whispered. "The place where someone is counting." It was the following morning, October 17th, that Arthur made a discovery that transformed their concern into terror. As he prepared to open his workshop, he noticed several clocks in the house had stopped. This was unusual. Arthur prided himself on keeping every timepiece in perfect condition. He checked each clock carefully and found that 6 of them, scattered across different floors, had all stopped at exactly the same time, 11:11. Arthur was troubled but assumed there must be an explanation, perhaps a sudden change in temperature or air pressure affecting the mechanisms. He wound and reset each clock carefully. But that night, October 17th, something far more disturbing occurred. Eleanor and Arthur decided to stay awake and keep watch. They positioned themselves in the first-floor hallway, from where they could see Oliver's locked bedroom door. They took turns watching, determined to understand what was happening to their son. At 11:09 p.m., all was quiet. Oliver was in his bed. They had checked moments before. The house was calm, save for the constant ticking of the clocks. At 11:10 p.m., Eleanor noticed something strange. The ticking seemed to be slowing down, not all at once, but gradually, as if all the clocks were winding down simultaneously. At 11:11 p.m., every clock in the house stopped ticking. The silence was absolute and deeply unsettling. Arthur and Eleanor looked at each other in confusion. Before either could speak, they heard it, the sound of Oliver's door opening. But the door didn't open. They stared at it. The door remained locked, yet they clearly heard the sound of a door opening, then closing, and then footsteps descending the stairs. Arthur grabbed the lamp and rushed down to the ground floor. Eleanor followed, her heart sinking. They searched every room on the ground floor. Oliver was nowhere to be found. Then, exactly at 11:14 p.m., 3 minutes after the clock stopped, they heard a sound from the second floor, footsteps walking slowly across the floorboards. They raced back upstairs, past the first floor to the second floor bedrooms. Oliver's door was still locked. Arthur unlocked it with trembling hands. Oliver was in his bed, lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. His eyes were open, but he didn't seem to see them. His nightshirt was damp with cold sweat, and his skin was icy to the touch. "Oliver," Eleanor cried, rushing to him. Slowly, Oliver's eyes focused on his mother's face. He blinked several times, as if waking from a deep sleep. "Mama," he said, his voice small and confused. "Where did I go?" "You were here," Arthur said firmly, though his voice shook. "In your bed. You never left your room." "But I wasn't here," Oliver insisted, and he began to cry. "I was somewhere else. I was in the cold place again, and there was someone there. Someone was counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. They kept counting. And Mama, I think they were counting the nights." At that very moment, 11:15 p.m., every clock in the house began ticking again, simultaneously, perfectly synchronized. Arthur checked them all the next morning. Once again, several had stopped at exactly 11:11 p.m. It was at this point that Arthur and Eleanor Shaw realized they were dealing with something beyond their understanding. They decided to seek help. Eleanor's sister, Beatrice Caldwell, arrived from Norwich on October 19th. Eleanor had written to her describing the events, though she had been careful not to sound hysterical or irrational. Beatrice was a practical woman, a widow who had raised 3 children on her own. If anyone could offer sensible advice and support, it was her. Beatrice's testimony, given later to investigators, provides an outside perspective on what was happening in the Shaw household. "I arrived at my sister's house expecting to find a case of childhood night terrors or perhaps some form of sleepwalking. Margaret and Arthur are not fanciful people. They are sober, rational individuals, but I could see they were genuinely frightened by what had been occurring." Beatrice agreed to observe Oliver during the day and stay awake with Arthur and Eleanor at night. During the day, she found Oliver to be a perfectly normal, healthy child. He played, ate well, attended his lessons, and showed no signs of illness or distress except when the subject of nighttime came up. When evening approached, Beatrice noted, Oliver would become quiet and withdrawn. He didn't want to go to bed. He begged his parents to let him stay up later, to let him sleep in their room. Anything to avoid being alone when the clock struck 11. On the night of October 19th, Beatrice witnessed the phenomenon herself. She, Eleanor, and Arthur positioned themselves in different parts of the house to ensure full observation. Beatrice stationed herself outside Oliver's locked bedroom door. Eleanor was on the ground floor. Arthur was in the workshop, where he had a clear view of the hall clock and several other timepieces. At 11:09 p.m., Beatrice heard the clocks begin to slow. By 11:10 p.m., the ticking had become lethargic, like a heartbeat slowly stopping. At 11:11 p.m., silence. And then Beatrice heard something that made her blood run cold. From inside Oliver's locked room came a sound of movement. Not footsteps, but a sound she described as a displacement of air, like a sudden wind inside a closed space. She pressed her ear to the door and called out, "Oliver, are you all right?" No response. She fumbled for the key, unlocked the door, and threw it open. The bed was empty. The window was closed and latched from the inside. There was no other way out of the room. Beatrice's testimony continues. I stood there in shock, staring at the empty bed. The room was cold, far colder than it should have been. I could see my breath misting in the lamplight, and then I heard Eleanor scream from downstairs. Beatrice ran down to the ground floor and found Eleanor in the scullery at the back of the house. She was staring at Oliver, who was standing in a corner, facing the wall, completely still. "He just appeared," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "I was looking at that corner and it was empty. I glanced away for just a second, and when I looked back, he was there. He just appeared out of nothing." When they approached Oliver and turned him around, they found his eyes closed, but he was mumbling something repeatedly under his breath. Beatrice leaned in to hear. 27, 26, 25, 24. He was counting backward. When they woke him, Oliver was disoriented and frightened. His skin was ice cold, and there were what appeared to be frost marks on his bare feet, as if he had been walking in snow. But there was no snow anywhere in or around the house. At 11:14 p.m., the clocks began ticking again, perfectly synchronized, and 3 more clocks had frozen at 11:11. The next morning, October 20th, Arthur Shaw made a decision. He went to see Dr. Edmund Fletcher, the town physician, and told him everything that had been happening. Arthur brought his detailed journals, which documented each incident with the precision expected of a master watchmaker. Dr. Fletcher agreed to examine Oliver and observe the household. His medical report, preserved in the Melford County Archives, provides a clinical perspective on the case. "I examined the child thoroughly," Dr. Fletcher wrote. Oliver Shaw is in good physical health. His heartbeat is regular, his lungs are clear, and he shows no signs of epilepsy, fever, or other medical conditions that might explain episodes of unconsciousness or altered mental states. However, I note the child appears anxious and sleep-deprived, which is understandable given the disturbing nature of his experiences. Dr. Fletcher agreed to spend the night of October 20th at the Shaw household to observe what happened at 11:11 p.m. That evening, Dr. Fletcher positioned himself in Oliver's room, sitting in a chair beside the boy's bed. Arthur, Eleanor, and Beatrice stationed themselves at various points in the house. They had also invited Reverend Charles Whitaker, the parson of St. Bartholomew's Church, to be present. The Reverend had known the family for years and had agreed to offer whatever spiritual support might be needed. At 11:09 p.m., Dr. Fletcher noted in his report, "The ticking of the household clocks began to slow noticeably. This is an objective physical phenomenon, not a subjective impression." At 11:10 p.m., the slowing of the clocks continues. Young Oliver, who had been sleeping peacefully, begins to show signs of distress. His breathing becomes rapid and shallow. He begins to mumble in his sleep. At 11:11 p.m., all clocks stop. Complete silence. At this exact moment, Oliver Shaw vanished from his bed. Dr. Fletcher's testimony is particularly valuable for its clinical precision. "I was sitting less than 3 feet from the child. I was looking directly at him. There was no movement, no sound, no disturbance of any kind. Between one moment and the next, the child simply ceased to be there. The bed showed the impression where he had been lying. The blankets were still disturbed, but the boy himself had vanished, as if he had never existed. I immediately stood and examined the room thoroughly. The door was locked from the inside. I had the key. The window was latched. There was no possible way the child could have left the room by normal means. Yet he was gone. For 3 minutes, the house was in chaos as everyone searched for Oliver. Then, at 11:14 p.m., they heard a sound from the attic, a space above the second floor used only for storage and rarely accessed. Arthur and Dr. Fletcher climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. They found Oliver lying on the floor, unconscious. His body was covered in a thin layer of frost that melted as they watched. When they brought him downstairs and revived him, Oliver was barely coherent. He kept repeating, "I saw them counting. They're counting down. They're counting the nights." "Who was counting?" Dr. Fletcher asked gently. "The people in the cold place," Oliver whispered. "There are so many of them, and they all want to come back. At this point, Reverend Whitaker stepped forward and asked Oliver, "Come back from where, child?" Oliver looked at the Reverend with tears streaming down his face. "From when they got lost, like I'm getting lost. They said I'm almost ready. They said when they finish counting, I can stay with them." That night, after Oliver finally fell into an exhausted sleep, the adults gathered in the parlor to discuss what they had witnessed. Dr. Fletcher, a man of science, was visibly shaken. "I cannot explain what I observed," he told them. The boy vanished from a locked room and reappeared in an entirely different location, passing through solid floors and walls. "This defies every natural law, yet I saw it with my own eyes." Reverend Whitaker suggested they were dealing with something spiritual or demonic, that perhaps the house was cursed or Oliver was being afflicted by evil spirits. He offered to perform a house blessing and pray over Oliver. But Arthur Shaw, staring at his motionless clocks, had a different theory, one he barely dared to voice. "What if," he said slowly, "this has something to do with time itself? Every incident occurs exactly at 11:11. The clocks stop. Oliver vanishes and reappears. He speaks of counting. What if something is happening to time at that specific moment? What if Oliver is somehow falling out of time?" The others stared at him. The idea was absurd, and yet nothing else made sense either. The following days brought more incidents, each more disturbing than the last. The pattern was consistent. Every night at exactly 11:11 p.m., Oliver would vanish from wherever he was and reappear somewhere else in the house. The disappearances lasted exactly 3 minutes, and with each night, Oliver returned colder, more confused, and more frightened. On October 23rd, Oliver was found in the basement, standing in total darkness, his lips blue from cold. On October 25th, he was discovered in the locked workshop, surrounded by disassembled clocks he had apparently taken apart with impossible precision while in his trance-like state. On October 28th, he was found on the roof, standing at the very edge, and would have fallen if Arthur hadn't grabbed him just in time. Each time, Oliver returned with the same message: "They're still counting. The number is getting smaller." By October 29th, Oliver was terrified of nightfall. He would beg his parents to keep him awake, not to let him sleep, to somehow prevent 11:11 from coming. But no matter what they tried, as the clocks approached that fateful moment, Oliver would fall into a sleep-like state from which he could not be roused. Mr. Albert Wickham, Oliver's teacher, provided testimony about the boy's deterioration. Oliver stopped attending school after October 24th. "When I visited the Shaw home to inquire about his absence, I was shocked by his appearance. The bright, energetic boy I knew had become pale, hollow-eyed, and jumpy. He startled at every sound. He kept looking at the clocks throughout the house with an expression of absolute dread." Mrs. Agatha Miller, a neighbor who lived 2 doors down on Willow Lane, also gave her testimony. The whole neighborhood knew something terrible was happening at the Shaw house. "We could hear Eleanor crying during the day. We saw Dr. Fletcher coming and going. And every night, just after 11, we would hear strange sounds, like wind rushing through a closed space or a door slamming shut, though no door had moved." On November 3rd, something new occurred. Oliver, during his waking hours, began to speak about the cold place with more clarity and detail. "It's like here, but not here," he told his mother, as Eleanor recorded in her diary. "Everything is the same houses, the same streets, the same church. But there's no one there. It's empty and cold and silent. And when I'm there, I can see things. I can see forward and backward. I can see nights that haven't happened yet." When Eleanor asked what he meant by seeing forward, Oliver said something that chilled her to the bone. "I can see the night when I don't come back. I can see you and Papa looking for me. I can see the empty bed, and I can see all the people in the cold place, and they're not counting anymore because they've reached 1. Eleanor begged him to explain, but Oliver could not or would not say more. He began to cry and wouldn't stop until Arthur held him close and promised they would find a way to stop this. But Arthur Shaw, for all his skill with mechanisms and precision, was helpless against whatever force was pulling his son further away each night. On November 7th, just 3 days before the final disappearance, Arthur gathered every clock in the house, all 24 timepieces, and smashed them. He destroyed his life's work, his most precious possessions, in a desperate attempt to break whatever connection existed between time and his son's affliction. It made no difference. At 11:11 p.m. that night, Oliver still vanished. And when he returned 3 minutes later, appearing in the parlor where the grandfather clock had once stood, he looked at the empty space and said, "It doesn't matter, Papa. They're not counting with our clocks. They're counting with something older." The night of November 9th, 1891, was cold and clear. A harvest moon hung full in the sky. The entire household was awake. Arthur, Eleanor, Beatrice, Dr. Fletcher, and Reverend Whitaker. They had all agreed to keep vigil through this night, determined to prevent whatever was going to happen. Oliver had spent the day in a state of dull dread. He had barely eaten, barely spoken. When Eleanor asked him how he felt, he simply said, "They've reached 3, Mama. After tonight, there are only 2 nights left, and then it will be my turn to stay." They gathered in Oliver's room at 11:10 p.m. The boy was lying in bed, holding his mother's hand. Arthur sat on the other side, holding his son's other hand. They were determined that, whatever happened, they would not let go. As 11:11 approached, Oliver's grip on his parents' hands tightened. "It's starting," he whispered. "I can feel it pulling at me." Eleanor and Arthur held on tighter. Beatrice, Dr. Fletcher, and Reverend Whitaker formed a circle around the bed, each placing a hand on Oliver. At 11:11 p.m., the pulling sensation became overwhelming. Everyone in the room felt it, a force trying to tear Oliver away from them. Eleanor screamed, refusing to let go. Arthur held on with all his strength. And then, for just a moment, something impossible occurred. As they fought to hold on to Oliver, the very air in the room seemed to shimmer and distort. Dr. Fletcher would later testify that he saw, for a fraction of a second, a glimpse of somewhere else. A gray, empty place that looked like the room they were in, but wasn't. A place where other figures, translucent, stood waiting. The pulling force intensified. Oliver screamed, and then, with a sensation like something tearing, he was yanked away from them. His body vanished from the bed, though Eleanor and Arthur still felt the phantom grip where his hands had been a moment before. The sensation lasted only a second, and then it was gone. The room was empty. Oliver was gone. For 3 minutes, they searched the house with growing panic. But at 11:14 p.m., there was no sound of Oliver reappearing. The 3 minutes passed, then 4, then 5. Oliver did not return. They searched all through the night and into the next day. They searched the house, the garden, the street. The entire village joined the search, but Oliver Shaw was nowhere to be found. On November 10th, 1891, the night Oliver had said would be the final countdown, Arthur Shaw sat alone in his workshop. Around him lay the shattered remains of 24 clocks. At 11:11 p.m., he heard, very faintly, the voice of the one he knew. One. It was Oliver's voice, seeming to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Just that single word, and then silence. Oliver Shaw never returned. No trace of him was ever found. The local authorities investigated thoroughly, suspecting kidnapping or foul play, but found no evidence of any crime. The case was eventually classified as an unexplained disappearance. The Shaw family never recovered. Eleanor suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was institutionalized briefly before moving to live with Beatrice in Norwich. Arthur closed his workshop and never worked as a watchmaker again. He died in 1895, for years after Oliver's disappearance, of what the death certificate called a decline, essentially a broken heart. The house on Willow Lane stood empty for 7 years before it was finally sold. The new owners reported no unusual phenomena, though they did note that clocks kept in the house tended to stop or malfunction with unusual frequency. The only physical evidence remaining of Oliver Shaw is the photograph taken on October 12, 1891, one day before the first disappearance. In the image, 8-year-old Oliver stands beside the grandfather clock in the parlor, staring at the camera with those knowing eyes. And if you look very closely at the clock face in the photograph, you can see that the hands are positioned exactly at 11:11. In the decades since Oliver's disappearance, researchers have attempted to find rational explanations. Some have suggested Oliver suffered from a rare form of epilepsy causing fugue states, and that he wandered away during one such episode and died of exposure somewhere in the countryside. Others have proposed the entire family suffered from a shared delusion, possibly caused by carbon monoxide poisoning from faulty heating systems, a not uncommon occurrence in Victorian homes. But these explanations struggle to account for the testimony of outside witnesses like Dr. Fletcher, who observed Oliver vanishing from a locked room, or Mrs. Miller, who heard the strange sounds every night at the same time. The most disturbing theory comes from Professor Alastair Thorne, a historian specializing in disappearances of the Victorian era. In his 1972 book, The Lost Children of the 19th Century, Thorne documented 16 cases of children who vanished under unusual circumstances between 1885 and 1900. Of those 16 cases, 12 involved disappearances occurring at specific, recurring times. 8 included clocks stopping or malfunctioning, and 6 included testimonies from family members that the children had spoken of being somewhere else or of people counting. What if, Thorne wrote, we are not dealing with 16 separate incidents, but with 16 manifestations of the same phenomenon? What if at certain moments, in certain places, the barrier between our time and some other time becomes thin enough that vulnerable individuals, particularly children, can slip through? Thorne's book was dismissed by mainstream historians as speculation, but it remains popular among those who study unexplained disappearances. Today, the photograph of Oliver Shaw can be viewed by appointment at the Melford County Records Office. Those who have seen it in person report feeling deeply unsettled, though they struggle to articulate why. Some say it's the boy's eyes, the way he seems to be looking not at the camera, but through it, at something beyond. Others point to his expression, which seems to contain both fear and resignation, as if he knew what was coming. And there are those who claim that if you stare at the photograph long enough, you can see something in the background, a faint shimmer in the air beside the clock, like a figure almost there, but not quite. Like someone standing in the cold place, looking back at us from somewhere outside of time. The house on Willow Lane still stands, though it has been renovated many times over the years. Current residents report no unusual phenomena, but local legend maintains that if you stand outside the house at exactly 11:11 p.m. on November 9th, the anniversary of Oliver's final disappearance, you can sometimes hear a sound, a faint voice like a child's, counting backward from a number only he knows. 3, 2, 1, and then silence. The case of Oliver Shaw remains one of the most thoroughly documented and least explained disappearances in British history. We have multiple witnesses, medical testimony, and detailed diaries recording the progression of impossible events. We have a photograph that serves as a final, haunting reminder of a boy who was there one moment and gone the next. What we don't have is an answer to the question that haunted Arthur and Eleanor Shaw for the rest of their lives. Where did Oliver go when he vanished at 11:11? What was the cold place he described? Who were the people counting down the nights? And, most disturbing of all, are they still counting? Are there still moments when time grows thin? When the barrier between our world and that cold, empty place becomes permeable? Are there still children who might slip through, one disappearance at a time, exactly at the same instant every night? The photograph offers no answers. It only shows us a boy standing beside a clock, staring fixedly at something we cannot see, in the moment before he began his 27-night journey into impossibility. And if you ever find yourself waking at night and glancing at your clock, and if it reads exactly 11:11, you might want to close your eyes quickly and wait for the moment to pass. Because, according to those who study the Oliver Shaw case, that moment, that specific alignment of hours and minutes, may be more than just a number on a clock face. It may be a doorway, and something on the other side may still be counting. If this story has left you questioning the nature of time and the thin boundaries between our world and places we cannot see, subscribe to our channel for more documented cases from history's darkest archives. Hit the notification bell because we never know when the next impossible case will surface to remind us that reality is far stranger and more terrifying than we dare to imagine. Until next time, remember, sometimes the moments we think are ordinary may be hiding something extraordinary. And sometimes, what disappears at 11:11 may not be coming back. The truth, as always, is far darker than fiction. If you seek to understand the pulse of true horror, then like this story and subscribe to ensure you do not miss the next revelation. Tell me, what historical fear haunts your waking hours? And for the next case, look for the video on your screen.